The other thing that we want to look at is going to be our mean. And for that, I'm going to want to use my calculator. So I'll be right back. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, your cell phone does that. Why don't you just use your cell phone? Well, okay, here's the problem. I do my videoing using my cell phone. Love you, Samsung. Okay, but otherwise I would just reach into my pocket. However, I did find the Chevron Travel Club calculator. Yes, it does have a little bevel there, but who cares? Because it does the basic function. Here's what we want to do as we're figuring out the mean. Now, the mean isn't usually, well, I mean, I guess it could be mean if you're talking about like crime or something. But no, the mean has to do with the average. Usually when we're, even before you take statistics, the one value that we think about is the average value of those. You might know what the class average is for a particular score. Right? Other things like that. So we're going to talk about the mean, right? And then there's the standard deviation, and we aren't going to be calculating that, but we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, so here's what we want to do. In order to figure out our mean value, we need to take the total or the sum of all of the values, right? Of all of them, and we're going to divide that by the number of how many there are. Okay? Now, we know n is going to be equal to 30, so we'll put a little box around that guy as well, and this green box just wasn't working so well. Okay, so we got our domain, our range, we've got our median. Now we need to figure out our mean. The mean, or the average, is going to be the sum divided by the n. Good. Okay, so I didn't really want to, oh, that's all messy. I really didn't want to calculate by hand. Oh, that's bad too. A little better. No. Okay, so let's use the handy dandy calculator. So I'm going to have equals, okay, the sum of all of these, right? If I total them all up, my sum comes to 280. And then I divide that by 30, because that is going to be how many, right? We went through and we counted them, just smash that cap, divided by 30. 9.333333333, right? Okay, so our mean is equal to 9.3, and I'm just going to put the little line above there, meaning that that line continues forever. Okay, now, notice that our median was 10, but our mean is going to be 9.3, right? We're not necessarily going to be getting those same values for those. Okay, now, the next thing that I do want to go through and talk about is going to be, let's talk really quickly about standard deviation, because that has a little bit to do with our mean or our average, right? But then maybe we want to talk about the mode as well. See, we know that our mean is going to be kind of right here. Right? Now, what we could find is that they're all piled up right there, right? If we had mostly 7s, 8s, 9s, and 10s, then there'd be this huge crowd right here between the 8s, 9s, and 10s. They wouldn't vary so much from that mean, right? Everything would be really closely centralized to that mean. Right? Or you could have what we have here, right? We've got all the way down to 1, all the way up to 26. It's kind of spread out a little bit. Now, if we went even bigger, let's say that we went all the way down to -20 and all the way up to 50, right? We still might have a mean right there in the middle, right? At around 9.33333. Or it could be, and so how far out are those numbers? Right? And that's what standard deviation kind of does for us. We're going to create a histogram with these guys in just a second. But if you can picture all of those values, let's say we have 1 to 26, and we're going to do that little bell curve. And those of you who have taken statistics, I don't mean to bring back bad memories, but that bell curve is going to be something like that, right? It could look like that, or that bell curve could look something like that, right? Here they're all much more closely centralized. Here they're much further out. You could have even one more that looked even funkier, that was kind of high and kind of went up there in the middle, right? So how far out are these distributed? That's where the standard deviation comes, okay? So we're going to have our mean, right, or our average. How far out do you need to get a certain, I don't want to say quantity, I don't want to say percentage, but to fit within that standard deviation. That's kind of what the standard deviation means. There's a long equation that helps us get all that figured out. I don't want to go into it right now. I want to create our own histogram now with the numbers. And the reason is because it makes it a little bit easier to figure out our, that last one that I want to talk about, which is our mode. So what I'm going to do, I put them all out sequentially, but now what we want to do is we want to kind of build them up onto each other. So I'm going to take my 26s. I'm going to start right there. I'm going to take my 19. Right there. I'm putting them in categories, right? I'm categorizing by the numbers. Now, are there gaps in between? There sure are, between 13 and 19. 26, you guys are kind of out there, right? You're 7 away from any of the rest of us. So, Zach, not a lot of first names that start with Y, I guess. Ivanka? No, it's I. I think it's however you spell it. Okay, so, oh, no, wait a second. We got 13's pile up higher. Because there are 4, thank you, Matthew, Michelle, Micah, and Mara. There are 4 13s. Now, what the mode really is trying to do, and you're going to understand this a little bit more once I get my fun little histogram all created. What the mode is trying to do is figure out what number shows up the most frequently. Okay? Where's going to be the one that comes up more regularly? And so we're going through and getting all this figured out. Okay, so that mode is the value that shows up most often. Mode is the value that appears. Okay, it's not like magic, it isn't magical, but you get the idea. That appears most frequently. Okay, and so I look at these values and we notice that in the one category, thank you, Angie and Anna and Ashley and Andrea, you guys all have the A's, right? So there's going to be 4 of those. We've got 3 2s, 1 3, 1 4, 2 5s, 1 7, 2 8s, 10s. There are 3, okay, but there are 4 of those. So far, 1 is going to be that. 11s, we have 2. 12s, we have 3. And 13, we have Matthew and Michelle and Micah and Mara. Okay, Scott and Steve are out here, and Zach and Zoe are out here. So what we see for our mode is going to be 1 and 13. Is that possible? Yeah, we call that bimodal. Oh, look at that. Mode, right? And so in this particular example, or close that quote, our mode is going to be both 1 and 13. Okay? Both of those guys are going to serve as our mode. Okay, so let's go through the terms really quickly. The domain is like the kingdom, right? All of the possible different values that could be within there. The range is going to be what we actually see within those numbers. And for our example, they did actually fit the same. Okay, the N is how many total there are. Good. The mean is going to be that average, right? The difference between, the average is going to be the sum of all of them divided by how many we have. What is that average number going to be? Good. We also looked at our median. That's going to be taking the entire sequence of numbers, figuring out which one is in the middle. Right? Now, what happens with ours where we have 30 and 30, well, like 15 and 15? You take the average between those two middle ones, okay? So you take the mean of the two middle, I don't know. Confusing. Okay, and then the mode is going to be those numbers that pop up most frequently. What I would like you guys to do as you start moving forward in your studies, regardless of if you're in geography or environmental studies, or maybe you're going to be in something else, start to think about, probably you're going to need to take that stats class, unless you're taking the whole calculus class, but that's a crazy pathway to take as well. Power to you if you can do it. But if you're taking that stats class, start to think a little bit about, as you're going through the statistics, how is that going to relate to geosciences, right? How is that going to relate to the spatial studies that we've been looking at? Okay. Now, when we are trying to figure out the centroid of a polygon, right, as an area, what we do is we take the mean of all of the x values and the mean of all of the y values, and that's how we figure that out. And there's a lot of different ways that we're going to be using statistics throughout your geographic studies. And I hope that this helped a little bit. Hopefully we didn't get you too confused. We simplified things maybe just a little bit. Take care.